Code Keepers, we're back with another beautiful episode of Get on Code, where we talk about how we can be more empowered today than we were yesterday. You know, our code is empowerment. So we can really dive down the rabbit hole and give really specific details on what that empowerment looks like. But to keep it simple, we need to be empowered by what we think, what we do, what we eat, who we interact with, and the initiatives that we initiatize. So to that end, we're going to have a coach on our back today. Yep, the coach is here. So check it out. You've heard me say before, if you want to work at a high level, you have to have a coach. You know, Mary J. Blige had a singing coach, Faith Evans, right? Michael Jordan had a bunch of coaches, right? Sugar Ray Leonard had a bunch of coaches. Anybody who works on the top of their game has coaches. Presidents have a board of advisors, an advisory court that works with them. You know, kings and queens, royalty have advisors. We need coaches to be high level. So we're going high level today. All right, welcome to Get on Code, the Fly Guy Show, which is a series of melanated conversations focused on empowerment, health, wealth, and knowledge of self.
People think in binary choices because they are conditioned to.
And on the wall was a picture of a wolf and a lion. I think the wolf was the Democratic Party, the lion was the Republicans.
But the drug trade and all these illegal stuff that people do, that's still economics. It's just that they couldn't do it in a traditional system.
We're talking about melanated wealth.
So we can build wealth, but we just, for some reason, don't seem to be able to transfer it.
You had a great experience. Fine. That means nothing.
What were you told as a child about education? You had to be how many times better?
Every impression without an expression becomes depression.
All right, Code Keepers, we're back. And this time we have Coach Diamond Drip on the platform. Oh man, Diamond Drip Consulting LLC. Look it up. Do your Googles, do your YouTubes, do your Twitters, do your TikToks. You got a TikTok?
Everything except Twitter, actually.
Okay, do everything except Twitter. But look for that Diamond Drip, trying to get drippy. So look, Coach. Whoa, the idea of having coaches is so beautiful to me. It's important to us if we're going to operate at a high level. How'd you become a coach? Let's get some of your backstory. Let's do our vetting, right? Let's find out who you are. I mean, look, you call yourself a coach, so you must be experienced. You must have some great things and great strategies to help people. You know, you got a great background. I see some mushrooms in the background. That's interesting. You know, you definitely a bad chick. So we got the bad chick coach in the house. Give us the background story. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, the background story to getting to Coach Diamond Drip. It's a bit of a long one, but I will give you the spark notes here. So I have been in leadership development for, oh my gosh, it's so crazy to say, almost 7 years. I was a general manager of a gym. I believe you're from the DMV area. This is probably a little bit more DC than where you are in Virginia Beach, but we had a gym called Washington Sports Clubs. Many of them have converted over to New York Sports Clubs. That's a whole different story. But I started there as a front desk associate, and I worked my way up through front desk manager, sales manager, all the way up to general manager. And I had my own location until it shut down due to the company losing its lease in 2019. Yeah, so crazy story there. I was moving into my first grown-up apartment. I had just signed my first adult grown-up lease for a 2-bedroom for me and my daughter, who at the time was 3 or 4. And as I'm unpacking the boxes from the U-Haul, I get this call basically telling me that the position that I thought was going to help me keep a roof over our head is no longer in play. And so that was a bit of an adjustment. And so I did, kind of the side hustle thing for a while. I did the Ubers, the Grubhubs, the quick money. And I was like, I'm doing a lot of work, but it doesn't seem like I'm getting paid for the work that I'm doing. And not only that, I still have to worry about taxes. So this doesn't seem like it's going to be something that's sustainable. And so I kind of took a leap of faith. And even though I didn't know much about entrepreneurship, I was like, I'm tired of putting my financial future into the hands of people I've never even laid eyes on, relying on this company's salary or whatever to make a way. So I was like, I'll make my own way. And so the first business that I ever started was a product-based business. And it started off as like a side hustle. I eventually did the LLC for that probably about a year or two after, like most of us who start things as side hustles are like, oh, I've been doing this for a while. I should probably, put this on paper. And I always say that business, it allowed me to grow a business in the blissful ignorance of my own self-worth. And so while that business was successful, it was a product-based business. So I had a product, I assigned a profit margin, and that was the price. And about a year into running that business, I was also in school getting my visual communications degree at the time. I was gaining some confidence. I was like, I know Photoshop, I know Illustrator. Like, I think I can do this graphic design thing. So that started as a side hustle, and it eventually grew into its own business when I did the LLC for that. And so here I was, business owner of two, in school, still pursuing my degree, and a mom. Right. And I was rapidly burning out trying to do all the things. It was exhausting.
It sounds like a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
But we're built for a lot, but we don't have to hold a lot. I think because you're built for a lot doesn't mean you're supposed to hold a lot.
Yeah. That's one of my mantras now that came from one of my coaches. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what I didn't mention, because it was further back in the backstory, is I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 when I was 14. And so the depression from that diagnosis was sometimes debilitating. And I had always been kind of seeking for a permanent remedy. I had been on antidepressants. They didn't work for me. At that particular time when I was a business owner in school, I was self-medicating a lot with cannabis, mainly to treat the insomnia related to the depression, not to actually help me feel antidepressed. It was more treating the symptoms versus the root cause. And so in 2022, I ended up finding a clinical trial that actually ended up healing my depression. And
wait. You use the word healing. That's a different word. That's not treating. That's healing. That's different. That's okay. So when you say you were healed, what does that mean in that context?
Yeah. So I know people can be touchy with the word cured. So that was what I used to use, but I feel like healed it suits it so much better. So the trial looked at the efficacy of psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms. And it looked at its effects on depression. And so it was 1 hero dose, which is 5 grams or more for context. And it did what Prozac, Abilify, Trazodone, Risperidone, all the dones and all the alls that I had ever been prescribed for my diagnosis could never do. I later learned through one of my rabbit holes that that's because those things, when you look at them from a chemical standpoint, they're really just trying to replicate what psilocybin does naturally. If you look at the actual molecules of like the SSRIs versus serotonin and psilocybin, like they're so similar. But anyway.
Wow. I do need to say this is intriguing. I think we need to come back to that in a different conversation about the magic mushrooms. That's intriguing. That's intriguing. But so you were able to do some things that helped you.
Yeah.
And now you help others. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So after the trial, I was like, okay, I feel like these businesses are running me. I don't feel like I'm an entrepreneur in control of this situation right now. Like, how do I fix that? How do I take this structure and make it something that's fulfilling again? And so in the product-based business, what I would do is I would basically do some form of life coaching for free, where I would listen to my clients' problems, their dilemmas, and their ailments to figure out how to make the best product recommendation for them. And then in my graphic design business, many entrepreneurs that I was working with, you know, they would say that they needed logos, they would say that they needed a new website or what have you, and graphics. But what they didn't say that they needed was clarity. And so I would end up doing the kind of business coaching, brand coaching for free on that end. And so in addition to running the actual businesses themselves, I was pouring out a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of myself into my clients. But the amount that was being collected wasn't an energetic match. And so what I found was that in both businesses, the thing that I loved the most was the coaching piece. It was getting to know people. It was helping them by getting deep, if you will. That's one of my adjectives that people call me now. They're like, you're so deep. But it really is. It's doing the deep work and getting to know them on that level. And so what I was always asked was, how did you build a business? Because in our community, there weren't a lot of entrepreneurs. There were a lot of side hustlers, but there weren't a lot of people who had actually gone and made their LLC, created a brand for two businesses, logo, like the whole building a business online presence thing. There weren't a lot of people who were doing it consistently or at a high level. So even though the thing that really lit my soul up the most, especially after the trial, was helping people feel better, I knew that that wasn't a guarantee. I can't say if someone works with me at that time for 6 months, that at the end of 6 months, they were going to feel better, especially having suffered from depression for so long. So I what I like to call, I fear pivoted into business coaching, because I was like, those are measurable results. Those are, you know, you'll have a logo, you'll have a website, you'll have social media strategy, like you'll have systems in place, and you'll know more than at the beginning of the 6 months. And so that was how I became a business and mindset coach. Was doing that that piece. And
okay. Fear pivoting. Is that your iteration? Is that a phrase that you developed?
I haven't heard anyone else say it, so I will definitely take
credit
for it. Yep.
You're claiming it. So how does one fear pivot?
Yeah. So when you fear pivot, you may have something that is on your heart that is calling you to do something, but then the inner critic starts speaking loudly. Then society's messages of what's possible for you, even your friends and family messages of what's possible for you, it starts creeping in. And then you start putting limitations on what's possible. And so because you limit yourself, you're like, well, I can't do what I really want to do. So why don't I just do this instead? Because this seems more attainable. So that's what I call fear pivoting, is like having something that you know in your soul is what's calling you forward. But because of your beliefs, the limiting ones, you start to hold yourself back from that.
And how do you help somebody fear pivot?
Yeah. So I don't help people fear pivot. I help them pivot into what they are actually lit up to do. Because one of the things that I found one of the things that I found is that when you start something with fear or lack or scarcity at the start of it, eventually you're going to outgrow that fear. Eventually you're going to outgrow that scarcity. Whatever that limitation is, you're going to outgrow it. And then whatever you've created because of it, you'll outgrow it. And then you're in this constant cycle of rebranding or redesigning something or recreating something. When if you just start with doing what's on your heart, doing what you feel most passionate to bring into this world and just sticking to it, even though it may be hard. It's hard when you fear pivot, but it's even more rewarding than, I would say, hard when you start something that you actually love and you start to reap the benefits of it.
Wow. Earlier, you said the blissful
the blissful ignorance of my own self-worth. Yes.
Can you dive into that for a second? That's wow. What a phrase. What a phrase.
Yeah. So I say that because, like I said, with a product-based business, it's very straightforward. You have a profit margin. You might run sales every now and then, but the price is the price. But when you switch, like I switched into a service-based business. So aside from the overhead of like, you know, electricity for the home office and, you know, my softwares and things that I use, I essentially was the product. And we live in a culture that is constantly telling us that we're not enough, we're not good enough, and putting limitations on that. So the product-based business allowed me to grow a successful business. And I didn't have to worry about that piece. I was like, people are getting the product, you know, if they like the product, they like the product, and you get product reviews. But when the focus became me, I started asking myself questions, like, you know, am I worth that amount of money per hour, per contract? Could I really charge that much? I know other people are doing, right? That's when comparison starts getting in the way. It's like, okay, I see them charging this much, but they have all these other things. Like, I don't have those things. And you start getting in this loop of degrading your own self-worth and your own self-value. And it takes a hit to your self-esteem.
Wow. Code Keepers. We're learning and earning with Diamond Drip. Whew. If you like this content, if you've learned something, if you found value in this, then tap in everywhere but Twitter. Look up Diamond Drip everywhere but Twitter, and you can get more of this illuminating insight so you won't have that problem that she talked about. And we all suffer from it.
Yeah.
We all need to work on that. So Code Keepers, stay tuned. We got more Diamond Drip coming up soon. Okay, well, let's start from the tippy. Tell us how you got involved with magic mushrooms.
Yeah, I have to thank my best friend because she was always, whenever we would go or travel anywhere together, she would always be asking about magic mushrooms. And so, like, because she was so persistent about it, I finally looked into it and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'd be cool if we found some magic mushrooms. And so when I realized that antidepressants weren't making me antidepressed, I decided that I was going to try the all natural route. So I would try like lion's mane capsule supplements, which you can buy lion's mane at any Whole Foods. I would try Rodelia Rosé, which is recommended for people who have bipolar disorder to help with the mood stabilization. I would try natural remedies like making my own teas and things to help with mood stability and things like that. And we did actually find some magic mushrooms, and I tried microdosing with those, but I was never really showed the proper structure. So I always say that my participation in the clinical trial showed me everything that I was doing wrong recreationally. It showed me the importance of set and setting. It showed me the importance of integration after an experience. And so the trial that I participated in, it was a 15-week trial. And most of that was setting intention. It was getting a baseline for exactly how bad my depression was. So taking a lot of questionnaires, taking a lot of scales. And it was through those scales that I had been hospitalized in my teen years for suicidal ideation, self-harm, suicide attempts. Because at that time, growing up with the mom that I did, she was undiagnosed borderline personality disorder with narcissistic tendencies. I was eventually removed from her care due to child abuse and neglect when I was 15. But until that point, I didn't think that there was an escape. And so I thought that the only way I could escape that situation was to remove myself from this planet, from this lifetime. But as I got older and I realized that as an adult, I didn't have that overbearing control over my life anymore. I thought that I was past the suicidal things. And it was through the trials, like questionnaires and scales, that I actually learned that I was having a lot of passive suicidal thoughts. So especially around the time of the trial, I had just got my first whole life insurance policy. And so passive suicidal thoughts are ones where you think, if I died in a car accident or a car crash today, it wouldn't be so bad. At least, my family would get the insurance money. Or, if this were to happen today, it wouldn't be so bad. It would end the pain and everyone else would be better off. And so the first, 8 weeks or so, 8 or 9 weeks, is all about like taking those questionnaires, trying to get a baseline for how bad your depression is, and then setting intention for what you hope to get from the trip. And so the things that I had set for my intention, the main thing was self-compassion. I really wanted to cultivate that and self-forgiveness for myself. And the actual dosing day of the trial is a 3-day experience. So the first day you go in, you take your final drug test because they don't want you on anything mind altering. I had to give up smoking THC. I had to put my medical marijuana card to the side. And if I was on any antidepressants, I would have had to stop taking those. So they do the final drug tests. Then they have you do some final scales. They have you go into the room that you're going to be in during the dosing day. So that way it's not like some super crazy thing that you've never seen before, that you've never experienced before. You're able to try on the headphones and the sleep shades that they give you. And you're able to just kind of listen to part of the first song. So that way when you go in the next day, it's not just totally jarring to you. You also meet your co-pilot. So it's a program that they developed, the trial that I was in at Shepherd Pratt, which is up in Towson, Baltimore area. They have a co-pilot program where, in case your therapist that you've been getting to know for the past, 9 weeks has to go to the bathroom, they're not asking random Dr. Joe to come in and sit with you, and then heaven forbid you wake up from your experience and you're like, who are you? I didn't like, you weren't here when I went to sleep. So there's a co-pilot there so that if your therapist has something to take care of, you're not in the room with a complete stranger. So you meet her on day one, and then you kind of go home and you get a good night's sleep, and you go over your intentions one more time. And then the second day of this 3-day process for dosing is when they actually administer the psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms. They're able to take it out and they put it into these teeny tiny little capsules. And you just take like 5 little capsules. And then sometime after that is when you actually start to have what I call the experience. So that's when you start seeing music, you start feeling, like you've left your body. The lines of reality get blurred, and
Wow.
and you start having what I like to call is the experience. And so they have a playlist in the trial. And I have one that I recommend to my clients who do live in an area where it is accessible for them to have access to psilocybin. They have studied the effects of psilocybin on the brain so much so that they have created a playlist that actually is supposed to, when you're in like a euphoric stage, when you're in like a happy stage, like the music is very happy. It's very colorful. Well, it was for me. Not everyone sees color, but it was very colorful. And then they know kind of when you're in those more like reflective parts of it. And so they have kind of more like, lower music. It's not as upbeat. It's not as many instruments and things like that.
Well, so is it like you're on a trip and there's a DJ with you?
Yeah. So it's kind of,
Wow.
I called them song journeys. So that's what I refer to them as, because like at the end of each song, it was like a scene. Like if I was, because the psilocybin only, stays in your system for like 4 to 6 hours. Which is why in the trial, I had to stay there for 8 hours just to make sure that it was safe for me to leave the facility. But psilocybin only stays in your system for 4 to 6 hours. And so the playlist is a little bit longer than that. And so you can think of it as like, I don't know if there are any Broadway shows that are 4 to 6 hours, but I would think of it like that. Or maybe like a hodgepodge of different Broadway shows where like each song, at the end of it, it was like curtain call. And then it was like another scene. And then it was like, curtains. And so I call them song journeys because each one I took with it, different nuggets, different like wisdom points and things like that. And so, so that was the dosing day. And then of course, when you're done, they have you answer some questions about like, what did you experience? Did you meet God? Did you experience like unity, oneness with the world? All types of questions. It was like 100 questions on that one. And then you go home and they recommend that you journal. And so that dosing day was really helpful for me in showing me, like I said, everything that I was doing wrong recreationally. So I was too, I guess, chicken to do a full hero dose experience before that trial. So the closest that I would ever get to the experience dose was 3.5 grams, which the recommended is 5 grams or more. And so like I would have like the day, I would get all my work done. And then around like 4 or 5 o'clock, I'd be like, okay, I think I'm going to go on a mushroom trip now. And so I would, close down my computer, everything. I would take the mushrooms and then I would have my trip. And then because it was so late and I had to go to work the next day, I would just go to sleep. There was no integration. There was no nothing. And so the trial taught me that setting are important. Setting intentions for what you hope to get out of the trip is important because there were moments where it did get dark. And so having the intention of why I went in there, what I hope to gain from it, it helped bring me back when I was in those darker times of, getting really scared or getting, like, whoa, what's about to happen here? And then the actual dosing day, they gave me my dose at like 8 a.m. So I was done by like 2:30. I felt like I had been on a whole epic journey adventure, and everyone is just like, it's 2:30 on a Tuesday. It's
well, hey, there was a song about turning up on a Tuesday,
right? But journaling after, so like, you can't journal if you're sleepy, like. Right, obviously with the recreational, but with the clinical trial, they were like, journal, talk about what came up, talk about the insights that you had, which served me well because the next day I went in and, I started unpacking it with the therapist and the co-pilot who was in the room with me. And I started to pull insights from the different song journeys that I had. And then the rest of the trial from that point, it was really just about integration. So talking about what came up, how They tell you before you take the mushrooms, don't make any major changes in your life for at least 6 months. So like, how was I integrating these nuggets of wisdom, these insightful pockets on a small scale to help feel better? And how was my depression afterwards? So yeah, that was the trial.
That's an incredible story. And you started down this journey. I think you shared earlier that there was bipolar diagnosis.
Yeah, so bipolar 2.
Bipolar 2. And this magic mushroom experience healed you.
Yeah. I can honestly say that I have not I've not had a remission in my bipolar things. It was funny because the trial was on August 2nd of 2022. And so if my cycle is anything now like it was then, I was in the follicular phase. Follicular phase. And so like 2 weeks after the trial, I entered into the luteal phase, or as most people call it, the PMS phase. And so I had 2 weeks of relief. You know, I felt, energetic. I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like, the depression was gone. The dark cloud that had been following me for so many years was like, it was like, okay, the sun can shine now. And then 2 weeks passed and I started feeling tired. I started like beating myself up about like little things. I started, having less energy. Like it was so much. And I was so scared that the depression like had come back. And of course, now I know with the method that I use for my birth control, the fertility awareness method, like that's what happens. That's just hormonal. But even then, like tracking that and then after the 2 weeks had passed and I, had my cycle menstruation situation or whatever, feeling better, feeling like, okay. And so I started to pay attention, like the depression, it was in fact healed. However, being in this womanly vessel body, hormones are a thing. And so hormones happen to the best of us. And but yeah, I can honestly say that the depression, it's healed.
Ashe, it's good to hear that you found a solution, because a lot of us who are dealing with bipolar disorder or depression, high anxiety, ADHD, the gambit. Those of us who face trauma and we're still dealing with PTSD, the gambit, we haven't found what you found. So Code Keepers, that's why you need to get drippy. So I need you to go everywhere except for Twitter and find Diamond Drip and learn. This is a coach that can give us some good guidance. And as I've said before, if you want to be on top of your game, if you really want to be on code, you need a coach. So get on code, Code Keepers. Diamond Drip in the house.